Hello everyone, welcome back to the OneTalk podcast. Here with your host Ryan McCarthy, and today we are joined by Elliott Hagen. Elliott is the founder of Mind Your Head podcast, and watching Elliott's journey with starting this podcast, watching the guests that he gets on, also hearing about his story is what inspired me to get him on the podcast today. And the things that we talk about is Elliott, his journey, how he started the podcast, the passion and mission behind it, and why he wants to bring this value to the world, which is super important. It's all about breaking the stigma on mental health and opening up and people sharing their life experiences, so that way they can add value into the listeners' lives. And I think it's a very epic podcast, and I think everyone should check it out. But also, another thing that Elliott did before this podcast, it was actually the day before recording, he, out of the blue, decided to do a 70-kilometer run. And before this 70-kilometer run, he said he's never even ran 5Ks before. But then, with no training, out of the blue, decides to run 70 kilometers. So that made an epic conversation as well, and we broke it down, the mindset changes that happened within that, the challenges that came with that, and how we used his own mindset to overcome any of the doubt or any of the thoughts that were coming up so he can keep going and keep pushing. This is a very inspiring podcast, and we had a really good conversation, so I think you all will enjoy. In other news, if you could please share this podcast around, it helps just with the growth of this podcast and getting the message out there. If you could share it on your stories, if you could share it with a friend or a family member, it would mean so much. And if you could also please leave the show a rating, that would mean a lot as well. But without further ado, let's welcome Elliott. Welcome, Elliott. How are you, brother?
Yeah, good, mate. Very good. Very excited to be here. A little bit sore.
A little bit sore after yesterday.
After yesterday, we'll get into that. But yeah, really excited to be here with you today. Yeah.
Yeah, good to have you here, brother. I've been seeing the work you've been doing online with your own podcast and the conversations you've been having and the value that you've been bringing. It made me really interested in why you started this journey, what brought you to where you are now, why you seek the challenges that you do, like as in last night and things like that. So I'd love for myself and the audience to understand more who Elliott is, what's his mission, and what got you into this journey of what the work that you're doing.
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's a bit of a long answer too.
Yeah, go for it.
What got me into the podcast originally was I work away out in the mines and I'm alone driving my machinery for 12 hours a day by myself, and I started listening to podcasts. And there was this guest on a podcast. I don't want to say his name because I'm trying to get him on my podcast for a guest. But he's an ex-NRL player, and he talked about his battles with anxiety, depression, and how that led to drug abuse, him being alcoholic, and talked about his recovery. And for the first time ever, I heard someone put into words exactly what I went through and exactly how I felt. And I remember sitting in my truck thinking, I'm not alone. Like there's someone else that have been through it. And before then, I couldn't put into words how I was feeling or what I went through. And for the first time ever, someone did it. Someone put into words. And I was thinking, oh, that's so strange how his experience was almost exactly the same as mine. And it made me wonder, like, how many more people are out there that this could affect. And I thought, like, I don't want to be in the mines all my life. And I had a passion with rugby, and I can't play rugby forever. My body's a bit sore now.
Yeah.
What am I passionate about? And one of the things I thought about was I love chatting to people. And I've got my own sort of history and experiences with mental health, and I've got some mates who have been through some pretty heavy stuff, and I've got some family members who have been through some really heavy stuff. And I was thinking, well, why don't I start a podcast, get them to come in, we talk about our experiences, we get vulnerable with each other, and hopefully that will help just one person, just like that podcast did with me.
Yeah.
And that was the goal. That was the goal, just to help one person and to make one person feel like they're not alone, and make them feel not so isolated. And if it helps them reach out, ask for help, seek recovery, if it's anything along those lines, I thought it'd be great. And also, and also the guests that have come in, they haven't spoken about these things either. So if all else fails, it's a time for me and my friends to have a proper deep conversation on camera. And it was a bit of a healing thing, not just for me, but for the guests that have come in. Most of the guests haven't spoken about their issues publicly before. Especially my dad came on, and me and my dad had a pretty heavy healing moment together. So that was the reason pretty much for the whole podcast itself.
That's epic, brother.
Yeah.
I can see it with the episodes that you post. Yeah. And the cool thing about podcasting I find is that episodes live on forever. Like they're not going anywhere. People can always go and find them. That's
what I love about that, is that is forever. So my kids will be able to look at that. Other mates' kids can have a look at that. Like we've got that forever. And that episode with my dad, I think it's one of the most pivotal conversations that I've ever had.
Why is that?
Because my dad went through some pretty bad abuse as a kid. His dad came back from the war and was a really bad abusive alcoholic that flogged the shit out of my dad and his siblings, and to the point where one of Dad's siblings, his older brother, committed suicide, and it was a really traumatic period in Dad's life. And Dad was telling me that his dad would prey on the person that he would get away with the most. So if you showed any emotion, that would be weakness. So Dad, as a kid, thought the best way to survive is to show no emotion. So as he grew up, showing emotion would be weakness. So as a kid growing up, my dad was extremely loving, and he was always present, and he was never, he was so nice and gentle, but there was an emotional disconnection with us. Yeah. So he would be there for us, but if you maybe, Dad, I'm going through something, oh, you'll be right.
Yeah.
I think it might be a little bit of that generation too, but I just didn't feel, probably safe's not the right word, but I just didn't feel like comfortable that I could go to him and say, what am I worrying about? Or if I'm having some negative thoughts, he would just say, just carry on with life. You'll be right. Just get over it.
Yeah. Where do you feel like you went to go instead to find those answers?
I didn't.
Just suppressed it?
Yeah, I didn't. I didn't know where to go to, so all of my negative thoughts, I would suppress them, and I just thought I could just forget about them. If I bury them deep enough, I would forget about them, and as we all know, you could procrastinate as long as you want around your mental health, but it's always going to come back and find you. So, and the conversation I had with my dad was more so around being honest with each other. He never told me about his childhood, but I always wondered growing up, why is Dad a bit like this?
Yeah.
Why is there a bit of a disconnect with me and my dad? And I never told him about some of my dark times. So we both, even though we both had, a civil relationship, it wasn't as deep as what it could have been, what it could be. And then I asked him to come on the podcast, and I said, can we have a chat on camera about your childhood? And he goes, only if you talk to me about your dark days.
Yeah.
And I was like, done. We can do that. So for the very first time, he opened up about all his child abuse stuff and what happened to him as a kid. And it just, my whole thing was, the more we know about each other, the more we can understand each other, and the better our relationship can be. But when we don't know all the information about each other, it's really hard to build that connection. Yeah. And then for the very first time, I told him about some of my really dark days with anxiety and depression, and getting into drug abuse and not wanting to be alive. And that was really tough to talk about with Dad. But after the conversation we had, it was one of the best healing moments that we've ever had, and our relationship's completely different now. Even when we talk to each other on the phone, he lives away in WA, and even when we talk to each other on the phone, I can't describe it, but what we talk about now is so much more deeper than what we used to, and I think Mum was saying to me that he refused to go see a psychologist about his childhood traumas, refused to do it. And Mum tried to get him to go for 65 years to go see someone. And they flew back after the podcast, they flew back to WA, and Mum called me up a couple of days later and she said, I don't know what you guys talked about, but for the first time ever, Dad's went and saw a psychologist.
Yeah, well.
And I was like, fuck, how good's that? That he's, whatever that changed in him, he thought it was the right time to go talk to someone and seek some answers. And I reckon that conversation that we had, I think it unlocked something in him. I think it gave him a permission that he's allowed to show weakness, or not show weakness, sorry, show emotion, that it's not weakness. I think he really wanted to. I think he was at the door of like just wanting to have a chat to me about it, but he didn't like want to make the first move. And as soon as we had a chat, all the walls went down, and
it was like a finally like whew.
He felt like his shoulders dropped and he felt lighter, and like me too. Like I was lying to Mum and Dad for years, telling them that I was okay, and I wasn't. And I think for the very first time, we both didn't lie to each other. Like I would ask Dad about his childhood, and he wouldn't tell me. So I think for the very first time, it was such a vulnerable, honest conversation with a parent too. Like I don't know how many people these days have that sort of relationship with their dad. Or I've had a few mates come up to me after that podcast and say, I've never talked to my dad like that. And I was like, well, I didn't know that it was a little bit different having that sort of conversation with your dad. And I guess that being that generation too, when they're a little bit older, that having that emotional chat with them maybe wasn't as the normal as it is now. Yeah. So it was trying to break that stigma with Dad, and the way he talks to me now, he's like sending me kisses and like all this sort of stuff, and I'm like, I love it. I was like, yeah, that's giving me hugs and stuff. Yeah. And I was like, so it's definitely brought us closer together. And I don't want to say like things like we should have had this chat years ago, because we've had the chat now and it's great. But I don't think I was at a point mentally, emotionally to receive a conversation like that. If we had it years ago, I think that it happened at the right time.
Everything happened at the right time.
Yeah.
Probably similar to when you first had that podcast that made you feel like you weren't alone. It's probably in the similar thing when your mom was probably more open to listening to that type of content to receive it. I'm like, oh shit, this relates to me.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Did your mum end up listening to the episode as well? Yeah. What was her feedback?
She loved it. Dad kept a lot of stuff from Mum too. Even though Mum was around back in New Zealand when all that stuff was happening, Dad still shielded her a lot from the details. She knew that there was abuse going on in the family, and she knew how bad it was, but I don't think Dad ever told her the details.
Yeah.
So, and Dad's really resilient and really strong, but I think he didn't let Mum in too much. I think he kept Mum at a distance where he was trying to protect her. Yeah. Like, you don't want to know what's really going on. Whereas Mum and women, they want to be in there with you.
Nurturers.
Yeah. So I think Mum just felt distant. Mum was like, I don't want to ask him because it's a very sensitive topic. But I think deep down, like, I think telling her would have been the best option. But like what Dad grew up, he's like, if I show any emotion, it's a weakness. Like, why would she want to be with me if all this sort of stuff happened to me as a kid? So Mum was really, she was crying when she gave me a call when she was crying, and we had a really good chat. And she's really happy that he's finally had a chat about it. And Mum's been trying to like talk to him about it for years, and she would really get like a stiff shoulder about it. So she was like, oh, better not. I won't push it. So I think their relationship's better, I think, that they can have a good honest chat about it too, and Dad can just open up to her and just know that it, like what Dad say to me like before the episode, the night before we had the episode, how are you feeling before we started? And he goes, I'm really nervous.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, what's that? And he goes, oh, me and your mum had a few wines last night and we had a good cry on the couch together. So I think it was like a good bonding experience for them and a good healing process for them.
Definitely.
Even though it was 65 years ago, it's crazy how that happened 65 years ago, and the emotion and on Dad's face, like it happened yesterday, really put into perspective how bad it must have been.
Yeah.
And I just remember saying to Dad, like, I'm so proud of him that he went down a different path, never drank around us. I've never seen my dad drunk. Didn't drink around us as kids. Didn't whack us or anything, and gave us a really good childhood.
That's great.
Yeah, and you see it a lot where you get abused and you sort of head down and you take your trauma out on drugs and alcohol. And some of his siblings did that, and Dad went down the other route, was like, I'm gonna break the cycle, and I'm gonna create a better life for me and my family.
Did he open up and say why that was?
Why he broke the cycle?
Why he wanted to break the cycle?
Dad's very stubborn.
Yeah.
He's seen firsthand what that can do, what drugs and alcohol, what abuse can do to a family. And he never wanted to be like his dad. He never wanted that for his kids. He never wanted that for his life. One of the things he said was that he knew that he had a lot of potential as a kid. He was very smart, very good at teaching himself things.
Yep.
And he knew that all he had to do was get out of New Zealand and he'll be sweet. And he just wanted a better life for himself, and he knew that he deserved a better life.
Yeah.
And I think that was his driving force. And even being a dad and I've got two other brothers, having out three young boys in the house, and we would have caused a lot of stress. Would have tested his patience a lot, and he was so kind and loving to us. So yeah, I said to my older brother, I was like, we're so proud of Dad, like knowing what we know now and knowing what he went through and who he is today. And we look back and like we were so spoiled as kids. We went camping every weekend, every school holidays would take us out, very outdoorsy, and both Mum and Dad just gave us such a good life. And I got a bit sad, like thinking about how good he provided for us and how good our childhood was. And I think about how bad it was for him.
Yeah.
And I just I don't want to feel sorry, because Dad never wants sympathy, but I felt empathetic for him that he kind of lost his childhood. But yeah, it was a really, really beautiful experience, and he's actually retiring this year and moving back to the sunny coast.
Oh,
so we'll get to spend a little bit more time together.
That's epic.
Yeah.
How do you find yourself balancing that battle with comparison? Like you said, with your childhood, you can sometimes compare to his. And like, how do you find the balance, or how do you even process that?
Yeah, that's funny you asked me that, because I had a chat about that the other day, that they always say that comparing is such a bad tool to do.
Like, comparison is the theft of joy. Yeah.
Yeah. And when someone says that, you know, when I was going through some pretty bad stuff, and I think to myself, hang on a second, I've got it so good. Like, compare myself to someone in a different country, like compared to them, I'm great. But then again, am I not validating my own issues that I've got going on?
Yeah.
And I did that, because people were like, well, just imagine if you're living somewhere else and you don't even have fresh water or something. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. I've actually got a hot shower. I've got a bed to live in. I've got food in the actually, my life is so good.
Yeah.
Oh, so that means my depression, anxiety doesn't exist then, because so it's hard. Like, it's hard when you go back to your question of comparison and finding that balance. It's like, I try to steer away from it altogether.
Yeah.
I try not to compare the good or the bad. I try to like keep other people's experiences, and even when talking about my dad's experience, I just try I try not to compare to it too much. I find empathy towards what he went through, but I'll you get too caught up in the what ifs, and I think it sends you down a deeper rabbit hole than you need to go down.
Yeah, and like the other side of the comparison as well, I think if you compare yourself to say like people that don't even have a house, but then you kind of dismissing what you're feeling and dismissing your own experience as well. So it's just always reflecting back on yourself and just showing gratitude for where you are for yourself and what you've done.
Yeah, 100%.
Because like even for myself and my balance, like sometimes I get caught up in what I'm doing now that I forget where I was like 6 years ago when I was just, a recovering drug addict and suicidal ideation and all these things. And I forget I even experienced all that. And I'm like so caught up in the moment, all this good stuff that I'm doing. I'm trying to chase my goals. I'm like, I'm not doing enough. What is all this? And then luckily enough, my partner's like, just chill out. Like, you're doing enough. Trust me. And I'm like, yeah, you're right.
I think you hit a good point then. It's not so much comparing yourself to someone else. It's almost comparing yourself to what you were. And I think that's the thing that I like to do is if I think I'm getting too ahead of myself or comparing myself to other people's situations, I try to just take a step back and go, okay, what were you doing 5 years ago? What were you doing 6 years ago? And I think, 5 years ago, I had no money. I had broken leg, couldn't play any rugby. I was single, thinking that I would never find a passion, or thinking that the only way I could be social if I took drugs and could drink alcohol. And then I think about that and think about where I am now, and I'm like, well, if I keep this momentum going, if I keep building, getting better every day, what am I going to be like in 5 years? And that's the goal, rather than sort of comparing yourself to other people's situations. Yeah,
exactly. It's just having like a vision in the future of what you want to be. Chase it, but then as soon as you find yourself getting too caught up in it, just like debriefing with yourself and remind yourself. And that's why it's awesome to have good people in your circle that can help you pick that out of you when you're so caught in your head sometimes.
Yeah, 100%. And the good people in my circle have been, I've been very lucky that probably 10 of my best mates, we all went to grade 1 together.
Yeah, nice.
Some of them, 3 of us went to preschool together. So we've known each other for close to 30 years.
Yeah, well.
Which is pretty, like, the more older I get and the more people I meet, I think that's very special and very rare that our friends group has stayed friends since grade 1 together.
Yeah.
So I'm very lucky in the sense that there's my good mates, we know each other so well. We've been with each other through the highs and lows. So, and they're always quick to say, pull your head in a little bit.
Yeah.
Or they say, no, I don't think you're trying hard enough. I think you're holding yourself back.
Yeah.
And they're great. They're ones that pull you in line, but also ones that challenge you and go, no, I reckon you've got more in you.
Yeah. And their words hold so much more weight.
Oh, heaps. Like when I did that run yesterday, I had some of my good mates were like, how far are you in? I'm like, 50 Ks. I've got 20 Ks left. I'm really struggling. And he goes, you'll be right.
Yeah.
You got 20 left. You'll make it.
Yeah.
And as soon as I read that, I went, oh, fuck, I have to make it.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like I have a responsibility to them as well as myself.
Yeah.
But when you've got all that support and all your best mates going, it's all right, it's pain, but you'll get through it. And you're like, yeah, you know what? You're right.
But that shows the importance when we have something that's bigger than us.
Yeah.
Like when we don't have the energy within, we have external energy, most of the time, other people that can bring that energy within us to keep going and fighting, whether it's, doing a marathon, whether it's fighting mental health, whether it's at the gym, whatever it is, just having these other sources of energy we can always pull from to keep us going.
Yeah. It's a very you think it's a very personal journey. And then when it gets hard, you realize you're not just doing this for yourself. You're doing this for your friends. You're doing it for your family. Like my process of recovery and dealing with some of my issues and letting go of drugs and alcohol and forgiving myself for a few things and going down that journey of self-love. Like I used to hate myself, and then I would think like this version of me is a terrible son, is a terrible friend, a terrible brother. Like I'm no service right now. Like I'm all that hard work that mum and dad did to, all that sacrifice and hard work they did to provide for us as kids, I'm wasting it. And yeah, there's parts of it like only you can change. I understand that. Like it's up to you. All your friends and family can do so much for you, but you've got to make the change. But when you do make the change, it's not just for you. Like I want to have kids someday, and I don't want to have. I'm trying not to have as many wounds as I can when my kids arrive.
Yeah,
I want to go through these battles and build resilience and do all this stuff for when my kids arrive. I'm in a much better headspace, and they can look back and go, "Oh, Dad's done all this stuff." Like I want to be a good example.
That's giving me goosebumps.
Yeah.
I love to hear that, because like I relate with that a lot, because I really want to have kids one day. And a lot of the work I'm doing for myself right now is because I know you relate with this, is a lot of the work I'm doing for myself, I do it because I know if I put in the most amount of energy into myself to do good, everyone else around me is only going to receive the best version of me. And that's going to be my partner, my family, my future kids and whatnot. And if I keep building on that, it's going to make me feel good in return. But then everyone around me is only going to receive that good version of me.
100%. It's just the start of it. It's like you just got to start. Once you start, it all starts coming together and you build on it. But it's just when you're in that deep hole, the hardest bit is just putting your hand up and going, you know what? I need a bit of help. And once you do that, it snowballs and it gets bigger and easier. And like you said, it affects everyone else and everyone's in on it and everyone's helping you. But it's just beginning and starting that journey is like what I found was the most difficult bit. And then as the years have gone on, like you said, it affects your family, it affects your friends. You're a better version of yourself. They get the best out of you. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, and that's why I think, like, especially for men, to have like a mission in life, because that's going to keep you driving as well. Yeah. And like, did you have a moment in your life where you felt like you identified having a mission?
That's a good question. Honestly, from when I was about 17, all I wanted to do was play rugby. I don't know how deep that mission, how deep you wanted to go, but all I wanted to do was play footy. Like that was like, if I could play footy for a living, that would be the dream. And I think I made that too much of my identity, and I didn't have anything else going outside of rugby. So all I did was that. And I think I took it too much to my self-worth. So I lived and died by my last performance. So if I had a bad game, down low. I have a good game. It's like one of the it's silly to talk about now, but like one of the greatest highs I've had is when you have a good game. You have a good game, you win, and then you're in the clubhouse afterwards on a Saturday night. I was like, how good's this? Like, this is the best feeling ever. But when on the flip side, when you lose and have a bad game, you're like, I don't want to play anymore.
Yeah.
And going back to your mission, it wasn't until I stopped playing rugby. I had some pretty bad injuries and I went through some drug and alcohol abuse. Like, I don't know if it was an addict, but it would be Friday to Monday. And I would probably need it to socialise. I would have a lot of social anxiety, so doing drugs and alcohol would be a good social thing to get me less nervous and anxious and I guess calm and more confident to talk to people. And then all of a sudden it's 4, 5, 6 years of doing that. And it got to a point where I was like in a really bad hole and didn't want to be alive anymore. And to come out of that was one of the hardest things I've done. I talked to Jordan last night about the run and I said, as hard as that run was last night, I think pulling myself out of that hole mentally was harder than that run.
Yeah.
And that run was fucking hard.
Yeah, no doubt.
But pulling myself out of that hole and getting my life back on track and finding a will to want to succeed in life and like trying to make a good life for myself. And I think once I started that journey, I started learning about self-development and hearing other people's stories and listening to more podcasts. I went, like I said to you earlier, I think that's when I started finding my mission.
Yeah.
Was, all right, I've been through some stuff. How can I help other people who've been through some stuff? And not so much coaching or mentoring. It's what I found helpful was listening to other person's stories, listening to someone's story. That helped me. So I was like, well, how about I can just be a storyteller?
Yeah.
I can just guests can come on and we can just have a chat. We can tell a story. We can share each other's experiences. And I felt like that was a very purposeful thing for me to do. And I think right now that's my mission, and that gets me out of bed every morning.
Yeah.
I think that was a big one for me. I've done a lot of jobs and the alarm will go off in the morning and I'll just be like, fuck, like dreading it.
Yeah.
And now I've started this podcast. I'm so passionate about it that I think about it all the time.
Yeah.
And I used to be really jealous about people when I hear people's stories and they can't wait to get out of bed to go to work. And I've been so jealous of that because that's never been me. And when people say, I love my job, I would do it for free. And I'll be like, oh, fuck that. That's so good. I'm so happy for you. But I don't think I'll ever find something like that.
Yeah.
I honestly thought I would just go through life and not have a passion and not be pumped to get out of bed to go to work. And I started this podcast. It's not like it's proper work anyway, but I'm so pumped to get out of bed. I can't wait. When I've got a booking on and a guest is coming in, it's the best day ever. It's like Christmas.
Yeah, super hyped.
Yeah. And like I said, I started the podcast and I sat down and I was like, well, what's my define success? Like, what's success for me? Because in the past, I never defined success. So when I was playing footy, I never defined what was enough. So I was always chasing something, thinking that it would fill a hole.
Yeah.
And when I stopped playing footy, because I didn't define success, I felt empty. Because I was like, oh, well, what did I actually reach? And I had to go back and go, hang on a second, you actually did a lot more than what you think you did. So when I started this process, I was like, no, I'm going to write down, I'm going to define success with this podcast. So what do I want to do? I think it was, all I wanted to do was impact one person. So if one person wrote back, gave me some feedback going, hey, I just listened to your episode. It's inspired me to talk to my mum about some things that I've never spoken to her about. And that was one of the feedbacks that a girl listened to the podcast and she opened up to her mum about she was sexually assaulted. I never told her mum about it, and she finally told her mum. And I remember reading it, going, "Holy shit!" Like,
it's powerful.
Like that one episode have just impacted her life and her relationship with her mum. And I remember just going, "Well, I've done it. Like, I can whatever happens from here on out. Like, I feel like I've succeeded."
Yeah.
And everything else has just been a blessing. Like everything else, all the feedback we've had from all the episodes has just been amazing. And I think that's been my mission so far is just continuing that. And
what do you think has been probably one key lesson you've learned from doing podcasting?
One key lesson. Something that I haven't been really good at is just sit and listening.
Sorry, the only reason I laugh is because that was mine too.
Was it?
Yeah, because I've realized before I did podcasting, like I would unconsciously like interrupt people when I'm talking. I didn't mean to do it. Then when I started podcasting, I would listen back to my first couple of episodes. I'll get annoyed with myself, like, stop interrupting. Then I realized, like, oh shit, that's me speaking on the microphone. So then I have to adapt that to life and podcasting, but it's been a big blessing learning that.
That's funny because I did the exact same thing. I did the first episode and I kept interrupting and I'm like, Elliott, shut up. Just let him talk. And even in general conversations with people, like they'll be telling a story and then I'll thought of something that relates to their story and I'll just quickly jump in. And I think just doing this podcast has trained me just to be really present in the moment. And I still have a little bit of anxiety here and there, but I'm managing it well. But it's allowed me to be really present with people's conversations and not think about anything else that's going on. So that's one of the big lessons, is being present and actually hearing them.
Yeah, that's the beautiful thing about podcasting. You learn so much about yourself, you learn so much about other people, but then you make an impact in the world for the people that listen to. So it's a beautiful thing, bro. And I want to go back to, before we move on, I want to go back to when you're in the cycle of drugs and alcohol, because this hit time for me because I was a drug addict from the age of 11 to 18. I got sober at 18, and the challenges of getting sober and battling all the suppressed emotions, then come out on top of that was like, it was a process in itself. It was painful. It was the most difficult thing I've ever done. But I want to ask for yourself, in your own experience, what was the deep belief, or the first deep belief you had that you know you needed to change?
I was probably when I was probably taking, I probably went through 7 months of going out every weekend and taking drugs heavily from Thursday to Sunday. And then suddenly footy wasn't a priority when all my job was to do right there was to play footy, and it suddenly took a back seat to partying. And I started thinking, fuck, I'm not normally the one to go out and party. I don't mind it, but I've never been this party person. I've never been the one to always, let's get keen for beers. Never been like that.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I couldn't wait to go out Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I've always been very good with my recovery, my training, doing what I need to do to be at a top level playing rugby. And that took a back seat. And it really scared me. I'm thinking, well, why do I not care about rugby anymore? What do I all care about is going out the beers and getting on the drugs. And I was too immature. I was too complacent to really recognize that. It was a thought, but I was too immature to actually act on it. And I remember my manager called me and said, there's a club over in WA that are keen to sign you. And I went, oh, great. Might be a good change for me to get me out of Brisbane. Might be good for me. And then, so I'm thinking, and then my manager said, I think it might be a good one, good to go. And I'm like, oh, sweet. So I started like getting my hopes up a little bit. And then he said, call me back a couple of days later, and he goes, no, the coach actually doesn't like you. And that happens in rugby. Like some coaches like you, some coaches don't, but it's not personal. But me being in this unknown, fragile state, him saying, yeah, the coach doesn't like you, but it's all good. And I'm like, what do you mean he doesn't like me? And he doesn't want to sign you. And I'm like, oh, fuck. And then it was all of a sudden like, oh, well, my care factor went out the window a little bit. And I stopped caring about rugby. And I more cared about, all right, let's just go party. And I remember this happened for a couple of years, really. And I remember I was in my apartment in Brisbane, and I'd just come home. It was like probably 3 a.m. I had a load of drugs that night, and I had a handful of drugs more. And I was like, I don't want this high to leave, because this high was so euphoric to me, because it would calm everything going on in my head. And I couldn't find that anywhere else. And but to be honest with you, I wasn't searching anywhere else. I was just thinking, when I'm sober, it would be too much noise, but when I take drugs, it would be all clear. And I go, this is the best feeling ever. And I remember thinking like 3 a.m, like, I don't want to go to sleep. Like, I don't want to wake up and not have this high. So I just looked at my hand, and I had a handful of drugs, and I was like, I've had too much. but then also thinking like, I don't want it to end, but if I have this, I think it might be harmful. And I remember thinking, oh, fuck it, if I die, I die. And I remember just like taking it. And I remember waking up the next morning, what I thought was the next morning, and I was like pissed myself, had this huge headache, like spewed up. Lucky I like passed out face down. I had spew on my side. That was Friday night. I thought it was Saturday, but it was actually Sunday. Like I passed out all Saturday, woke up Sunday morning.
Yeah.
And even then I was like in denial. I thought there was a problem, but again, I wasn't mature enough or brave enough to actually act on it. And then that same year, I, again, like just ignored it, went to work. That same year, I decided to go down to Sydney for New Year's.
Yep.
Ended up being a 5-day bender and came back from that, didn't sleep, didn't drink any water, came back to Brisbane and couldn't go to sleep. Put my head down on the pillow, I just get shocked awake. I'm thinking, what the fuck's to go here? So it was like 6 days with no sleep. I'll try the next day. Try to go to sleep that next night. My body would just keep shocking me awake, and I couldn't go to sleep. And it was like 9 o'clock at night. I go, no, this is an issue. Like this is almost 7 days without any sleep. Like I can't go to sleep. I probably need to check myself into the hospital. So I went to the emergency room at the closest hospital. And I would have looked horrendous. And I told the nurse that, look, I've had 4 or 5 days down in Sydney. I've come back. I can't go to sleep. My body won't let me go to sleep. So they did tell me what was in your system and stuff. And I was like, oh, look, it was ecstasy, MDMA and cocaine. And they're like, oh, yeah, we'll do a couple of blood tests and make sure everything's all good. And they came back like, you're severely dehydrated. Like my piss was pretty much black. Yeah. Severely dehydrated, and they're like, you can't leave. Like, they sat down a carton of water and put me on a drip. Like, you can't leave until all that water's gone. And I was like, oh, righto. And then the doctor came in and was like, do you want to know what was in your system? And he was trying to be a father role a little bit. And I was like, not really. And he goes, no, I'm going to tell you what's in your system. And I was like, yeah, righto. And he told me what was in my system, and it was everything that I mentioned. And he said some long word, and I was like, well, what's that? And he said it was ice. So that was one of the reasons I couldn't sleep, and I was just like, "What the fuck? Like, I'm not an addict. Like, I don't have a problem." And then I'm sitting there, and I'm like, maybe I fucking do have a problem. Like, what am I doing here? And he walked off, and I ended up calling my parents and told them I was in hospital and. Pretending like everything was okay, and I could hear in their voices they knew that it wasn't okay. And again, didn't tell them, wasn't honest with them. And I got off the phone with them, and I remember them just saying, "Look after yourself, we love you." And I got off the phone with them, and I just laid in the hospital bed, and I just thought to myself, "What the fuck am I doing with my life?" Like I said to you before, like they work so hard to raise 3 boys. Not like we weren't wealthy, we weren't well off. Like we were just scraping by growing up, and they provided so much for us, and they were such good parents. And what was I doing to repay them? I was just running myself into the ground for what? Because I was too afraid to voice my emotions. Yeah. Too afraid to put my hand up and go, "Hey, look, I'm actually struggling. Like, I don't know what I need to do, but I'm just saying, like I was too afraid, and that fear thing was just like ruling me. I was like, why am I too afraid to do this? Like, why am I too afraid to seek help? And is it going to get to the point where it costs my life because I'm too afraid to ask for help or too afraid to reach out? And I remember sitting in the hospital bed, and people go through, I don't know what your experience is like with drugs and stuff like that, but I know some people go to rehab. And for me, sitting on that hospital bed, it was like a flicker switch. I remember sitting there, and like someone just flicked a switch at me, and I was just like, all right, I know what I need to do. And I stopped drinking, stopped drugs, moved back to the sunny coast, quit my job, moved back to the sunny coast, picked up a job and was like, start fresh. All right, remove myself from that environment. Go back to surrounding myself with my best mates, people that I know. All right, let's start fresh. And then I went and saw a psychologist for the first time and was like, I don't know what you're going to be able to do for me, but I think I need to talk to someone. And it was a really good experience with her, because she barely said anything to me. She just said, "What's up?" And I'd tell her the story, and then she would go, and I'd stop, and she would go, "What else?" And I'd go, "What else?" And then I would tell her some more, and it was 3 sessions of me word vomiting and just telling her everything that was on my mind. And I think it was just the fact of just voicing it and her just saying, "It's all right." And it was the best thing for me, was seeing someone that I didn't know, because some of the thoughts that were going in my head was, I didn't want to talk to anyone that I knew, because my thoughts that were going through my head was very horrific and very traumatic. And I knew if I talked to someone that I knew, they would feel sorry for me. And I don't blame them for feel sorry for me, because if they love you, they're going to feel sorry if you want to kill yourself. But I never wanted anyone to treat me any differently. I didn't want anyone to be, "Oh, that's Elliott, he's going through some shit, like don't talk to him or stay away." I never wanted to be treated differently. Like, don't treat me any differently. So I was like, instead of talking to someone that I knew, how about I go to someone that I don't know, so they have no love connection or anything like that towards me. They can just treat me like a client.
Yeah.
And go, "Yeah, you're all good." And I go, "Oh," because I know they're not going to go home and worry about Elliott. And that's all. I never wanted anyone to worry about me.
Yeah, like checking up on you all the time and stuff like that.
I was like, "No, don't treat me differently. Like, just be there." And it's not saying my mates were in the wrong or anything like that, but I just didn't want any special treatment. I knew my mates would give me that, or my family would give me that. And my mum still does that now. She always checks up on me. And I'm like, "Mum, I'm good."
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the moment, I think, that heading back to your question, was that moment in hospital bed was the moment that I realised that I needed change, and I wasn't heading down a road that was going to be good for me at all.
An important thing you touched on then, I think a lot of people will relate to this, is when you said you didn't want to open up to the people around you because you don't want anyone feeling sorry for yourself. I know I've experienced that. I know a lot of people here listening will experience that in their life as well, but to still go out and seek support, that you can speak to someone like a psychologist who doesn't know you. I think that's such an important message, because I think too many people can get too caught up in their own world that they don't see that there is external support. So like, if you're someone listening and you relate to what Elliott was just saying, like, go and see a psychologist, go speak to someone like a coach or a mentor or anyone in that realm that you can just unload your stuff onto, and they can guide you and support you through that. And that way you don't have to stress about family and friends worrying about you as well, because that could just be another layer of added stress and issues to what you're already going through.
Yeah, 100%. And we're all different too. Like, I've got a mate who's been on the podcast, and we share similar feelings towards that, with our similar experiences. And what I said to him was, that was the best thing, was going to see someone else and not seeing my friends or family, because I knew they would treat me differently. And he said to me, well, the best thing for him was seeing his mum. So I was like, oh, well, like, that was, I didn't even want to think about talking to my mum about it. And he was like, the best thing was talking to my mum. So I think everyone's experiences are so different. But that's such a good thing, is that if you don't feel comfortable talking to your friends or your family, if you don't want to think you're going to feel treated differently, that there's so many different avenues to go down. Like, seeing a psychologist is so daunting at the start.
Yeah,
it is. But I want people to understand that it's such a safe space, and it was honestly the best thing I could have done at that time. I unloaded for 3 sessions. I think it went for about an hour, and I talked for the whole hour, and she just sat there and just listened to me word vomit for an hour, for 3 sessions. And it was one of the best feelings, because I walked away like the weight of the world was off my chest. Like, I could finally have a deep breath and was like, oh, like I felt really tight. Like for years, I just felt really tight in my gut, just having all this anxiety and pressure in my gut, thinking I'm the only one, no one will ever understand me. And then when I went and saw a psychologist, and I remember her telling me, you're not the first one to tell me this. And I thought it was so individual. I thought what I was feeling was so individual and so personalized that no one else has ever been through this stuff, like how arrogant of me. And for her to say, yeah, I've had heaps of people tell me the exact same thing.
Yeah.
You know, and it made me feel so much better knowing that I'm not the only one. And there's light at the end of the tunnel. I think that's a huge message for people that are listening, is that it doesn't matter how deep you are in that tunnel. There is always light. Always light. And for a couple of years there, I really thought there wasn't. And I had someone say to me, I was in New Zealand. His name's Jono. He might be listening. I remember going to him and I was really, really in a deep, dark place. And I said to him, I don't think I'm ever going to come out of it. I think this is going to be my life forever. And he had a little smirk, and I was like, well, that wasn't funny. Why are you smirking for? And he said, you'll get out of it. And I go, how do you know? He goes, mate, it might take you 2 years, it might take you 10 years, it might take you 20 years, but I'm telling you, you'll get out of it. And I remember 10 years after him saying that to me, I remember being in the car, and I don't know why I remembered it, but it was 10 years after he told me, and I remember being in the car and thinking, holy fuck, I actually feel really good with my life. Everything I feel like I've got a purpose, and I feel like I'm striving for something, and I feel like I want to be around. And I've got aspirations for a family and finding love and having kids and stuff. And I sent him a message. I was like, listen, we haven't spoken in a while, but remember when you said to me that there'll be light at the end of the tunnel, and I didn't believe you? And he goes, yeah. I go, I just want to let you know that I'm at the end of the tunnel and there's light. And he goes, I told you.
Yeah.
And I try to tell people that. I try to tell friends that are going through some stuff that they think that there's going to be no end and that's going to be their life forever. And I try to get through to people that there is always light. You just got to hang on and do the work and trust the process, and there's always light.
Yeah, you just got to keep hope, you know, like sometimes you can get too caught up in trying to do too much at once. It doesn't work, and then you're like, what's the point? But it's like a slow burn, you know, like you said, it can take 2 years, it can take 5 years, it can take 10 years, but it's just staying on that path of going forward, and eventually you'll see the light, or you'll reach the destination or whatever it is. Because one thing I say to people, like if they're in a dark spot, I say 1% every day. Doesn't sound like much. Like you could move your toe 1 inch every day forward. But by the end of the calendar year, that's 365% further than where you were when you started. It's like, cool, well, if you have 2 months off in that calendar year, you're still ahead 305%. Worst case scenario. Yeah. Like you're still ahead, and just keep on that path. And
that's a good analogy that I've used when I did the run yesterday.
Yeah.
Was people, how did you do that? And I go, I looked at the furthest light pole and I ran to that light pole. And then I saw the next light pole and I ran to that light pole. I didn't look at the maps. I didn't see how far I was away from Noosa. I just saw a street. I picked that light pole out. I'll just run to that. And I run to it and I go, oh, that was good. And I go, where's the next one? And I run to that. And it was just like, it's good to have a goal, something to strive for, but don't keep looking at it and watching and trying to expect it to happen overnight. And it was just like one step in front of the other. And it's a good analogy to use. Like, I think it's just head down and 1 foot in front of the other. And in the long run, you'll get there. But I think sometimes we get caught up that we don't see process straight away. We don't see progress straight away. And then we lose a bit of faith or lose a bit of hope.
Yeah. And
it comes down to, like you said, just find that little bit, find that light pole in front of you and run to that spot. And that's what I learned on that run yesterday. Was just there was a lot of self-doubt coming into it, and a lot of times where I because I know the road, so I know what's coming up. So I know what's around each bend.
Yeah.
So it wasn't. So I knew the route. So it wasn't like this was like I don't know what's coming around the corner. Like I knew how far I was away from each destination, each checkpoint. So it wasn't. I was like, oh, fuck, I didn't need to look at a map because I know where I need to run.
Just for context of the audience, you ran 100 Ks yesterday, was it?
Yeah, it was 70. It was just under 70 Ks yesterday.
70 Ks. Sorry,
70 Ks yesterday from my house in Maroochydore up to Noosa is 35, and then had a little break in Noosa, and then 35 Ks back to my house in Maroochydore, and I did it with no training. I hate running. I did it. The most I've run was about 2.5 K prior to this, and I got up Sunday morning at 4 o'clock in the morning and put my runners on and decided to head up to Noosa.
Why?
Yeah, really good question. Really good question. I was asking myself that question yesterday.
I can imagine.
There's a lot of levels to it, but to put it simply, to begin with, I did it to see if I could do it. And I think I'm a very stubborn person. I think my family might agree, I'm a very hard person to give advice to, in the sense that I want to find out for myself. Yeah. If I'm going to make mistakes, I want them to be my mistakes. I don't want to make mistakes because you told me I should do this. And I think I caused my parents a lot of hardship. Them telling me I shouldn't do something and then me going and doing it and learning it.
Yeah.
But I think that's who I've been growing up, is that let me experience it. Even though that happened for you, it might not be happen for me. So I've always been the person that let me figure it out.
Yeah.
I want to go try it for myself and have my own experiences with it. That's probably a little bit of it. And then what we talked about earlier is that I have a trigger that I hate it when people tell me I can't do something. And it's never been like a direct, you can't do this. It's always been like a sly little comment, a little sarcastic comment, like I bet you can't do this. And I think I have so much self-doubt. I think as a kid growing up, I believed I didn't have much resilience. I believed that I was a huge quitter. I would run away from any hard roads that would take. And to be honest with you, the right way is always probably the hard road, and the easy way is probably the wrong road. Yeah. You know, the easy way out's always probably the thing you shouldn't be doing.
It's like do what's right, not what's easy.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So as a kid, I don't think I had much ticker about me. I think I always chose the easy road. I reckon as a kid, I always was a quitter. I always run from my issues. I always procrastinated on things, and I always was really... I got lazy and complacent, and it's like when people give you that insult, it hurts the most when you think it's true. And it wasn't so much proving to other people, but it proving to myself that I wasn't weak-minded.
Why do you feel like you had to prove that to yourself?
Because I thought I was. Even though all the things that I've been through, I think that to do something like that with no training and just to get out there and was just to prove myself that I can put myself through all that hardship and all that pain and keep going. Because even when playing footy, you can work your ass off, but you're in a team. So if you're feeling a bit tired, you got a teammate there with you. But when you're out on that road, if you stop because you need a break, that's fine, but no one's going to come and help you. You're not getting any closer. And I remember every time my legs were getting shaky, they weren't moving, my hips were stiffening up, and I would have to have a break. And I was sitting there and I was talking to myself, because you're alone, you start having conversations with yourself. And I remember sitting down there, it was so long to go. And I remember just chatting to myself going, yeah, you can have a break, but you still got to get up and run. And I go, yeah, I know, shut up. Like, just let me have a break. And then another voice would go, yeah, have a break as long as you want.
Yeah.
But you still got to get there.
Yeah.
And it was that whole thing of overcoming self-doubt. It was proving to myself that I'm so much capable of so much more than I think I am. And a lot of us think that we're at a limit where we can't give any more. But beyond that, you can give so much more.
Yeah.
And I reckon for me to feel, this might seem a bit sadistic, but for me to feel alive, like truly alive, I need to experience all emotions. I know that seems silly, but when it's joy and happiness and ecstasy, it's like I'm on a high, like I feel alive. But there's a part of me that I need to feel pain. I know that's silly.
No, it's not, because it's like if we don't feel pain, how do we know how good is?
Yeah.
You know?
And I wanted to put myself through something that was so painful that would make me feel alive. And I thought there's no better way and like that was 10% physical and 90% mental, that whole battle. Like there was so many situations where my inner demons came out. So self-doubt, feeling like I'm not good enough. That little quitter that I was telling you about when I was a kid, like I was just an absolute quitter. Like I would quit on everything. Like I definitely lost relationships, friendships, because I was too immature. I was too much of a quitter. I didn't want to go through any hard work. I feared hardship. I feared pain. Yeah. So it comes a point where I just had enough, and I was like, you know what? Like I need to do this mentally. And there was so many inner demons that came up. Like so many times I wanted to quit, and so many times like self-doubt, you're not good enough. Everyone was right. Just like everyone was right about you.
Yeah.
Like even though people might not be thinking that, it was a tool I used and was like, you know what? Everyone thinks you're a fucking quitter anyway. And I said, oh, well, I'm not a quitter. Like I would just use it as fire, as motivation, to get through it. Yeah.
I think it's not weird. I think it's completely great, because when you said you need to experience all emotions in life, because we have to get comfortable with the pain in life, because if we don't experience the hardship, we don't get comfortable with it, that's when we start doing things that will suppress us, like getting back into the partying scene and drugs and alcohols and sex, porn, like whatever it is that people use to suppress themselves. But once you do something intentionally to put yourself through hardship, like going for a run and feeling every emotion, you're comfortable with that. And that's where you learn the most about yourself in those moments, because you have deep beliefs come up that you probably didn't even know you still had attached to.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it was so much of just proving to myself that I'm so much more capable. And I think a lot of my life, even when I was playing rugby, I would sell myself short. I was too afraid. It's like I don't know if we've spoken about it, but it was almost, when I was playing rugby, it wasn't a fear of failure. It was a fear of success. I feared my own potential. I feared, what if I actually tried? What can I accomplish? And it was almost like, well, no one expects you to succeed. And everyone expects you, like when you're going through something like this, or if you're trying to play footy and be professional, everyone's like, well, it's okay if you fail. Like not many people make it, so it's okay if you fail. No one expects you to succeed.
Yeah.
And even this, like my mate was like, you're doing a what this morning? And I'm like, run 70 Ks. And he's like, you haven't even run 2 Ks.
Yeah.
Well, what makes you think you can do it? And I go, why can't I do it? Everyone expects you to fail. So it was like my fear I feared my own potential. I feared what am I capable of and what can I achieve? And part of it was thinking, all right, I hate running. I hate it. I'm going to go do something that I hate and still accomplish it.
Still show up.
I'm going to put myself through all this fucking pain and misery, and I can't even walk today. over something that I hate. Imagine what I can do when it's something that I love.
Facts.
And if I can do all that, and I hated it, and I did 14 hours of running, and I absolutely did not enjoy one bit of it, imagine what I can do when I'm actually passionate about something. And that goes back to the podcast that I'm doing. I'm like, man, as much as I thought I was giving it all, I can give so much more.
Yeah. There's always more in the tank.
Always.
That's the thing as well. And it's such a cool thing that you've experienced and had a realization of, because like a lot of people work jobs they hate. They show up for 50 hours a week, 40 hours a week for something they hate to do. It's like, can you imagine if you go on the journey of finding what lights you up and your passion, and you have 50 hours a week of energy to put towards that? Can you imagine how much growth is going to happen in your life and 100%. How much you'll learn as well? So that's a really cool fucking reflection.
Honestly, I didn't think it was going to get that deep.
Yeah.
No, I don't know if it was me not being a runner and not realizing how far that is.
Yeah.
Because all my runner mates were like, what?
Yeah. I can imagine, because I think my longest run personally would be about 10 Ks.
Yeah.
That's the furthest I've ran. And even then I can imagine what the extent of the force I'll come up for me would be if I did 70.
Yeah, and it was a lot more. I mentioned that it was 90% mental, but I had to deal with a lot of demons that came up, and I didn't expect that to be that case. I thought it was just going to be, your body's going to be sore, your back's going to go, your hammy might get a bit of a cramp, your calves going to be sore. But it wasn't the physical side of it. I mean, I started to block out the pain.
Yeah.
And realize that it's going to be over. But the mental challenge that it was is something that's going to be with me forever, I think. The places I had to go and the conversations I had with myself, it was almost like a healing process. It was almost like a meditation session where you're answering questions and you're getting into like this deep zone, and it was no one else was around and no one else was going to come help you, and you had to figure it out on your own.
It's like going to war with your own mind.
Yeah, it really was, and it was I've never felt anything like that before. And looking back on it today, I think it's strange. It's probably the best thing I've done for my mental health in a crazy way. Yeah. In a crazy way, I think it's probably the best thing I've done for my own mental health. Yeah.
I agree for myself. Like, I think it's so important for people to seek challenges, like whatever extent they want to seek challenges, whatever they see their limit to be, but seek things that are going to push you out of your comfort zone, and that will challenge you, because one, you're going to learn so much about yourself, and two, you're going to realize how much more you want to keep doing it because of the benefits you get, like the day after, of like the feeling of accomplishment, the amount of dopamine you get because the reward of actually doing something so fucking epic. Like, there's so much benefit from actually stepping outside that comfort zone and just giving things a crack. Yeah,
100%. And that's the point. I don't feel like I'm growing. I don't feel like I'm progressing in life unless I'm getting outside my comfort zone. Yeah. I feel like starting the podcast was getting outside my comfort zone. That was big for me. And then I suddenly became a little bit complacent, a little bit getting settled in the podcast and going, okay, this is nice. This is a nice little comfy zone. I kind of like this. And then me thinking, I think I'm stagnant a little bit. Like, what's the next thing? Like, what's the next thing that I need to do? What are some inner things that I need to deal with? And I think going through physical and mental pain was something that I needed to prove to myself that I could do. And also silence any critics or even inner critics or any doubts that I had about my own strength. Physical strength, not so much, but my mental strength, I was like, what am I capable of? What can I achieve? And my girlfriend was driving out and saying, you should drive out and check up on me. You good? Yeah. I'm like, I'm good. I'm just letting you know I need to do this. Like, you probably don't get it. I'll explain to you when I get home later tonight. But it's something that I need to do.
Yeah, because I feel like if we're not fighting a battle externally, if we're not fighting something that, when I say fighting and battle and stuff, I mean like seeking uncomfortable situations or doing things that cause hardship to make us grow. If we don't seek that, I feel like then the battle becomes within. And we have
100%.
fights of ourselves, and then our brain gets in war with who we are and what we are. But instead, if we use that battle on the outside, I feel like it gets away the battles we have within.
Makes it easier.
Yeah.
You're training your brain. Like if you, it's chosen suffering, because you're going to have life. You're going to go through life when there's going to be a lot of unchosen suffering.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to get sick, or your parents are going to pass away, or, you know, someone's going to get injured, and there's a lot of unchosen suffering in life. And I think the best way to deal with that is chosen suffering.
Yeah.
You know, in a weird way. I think the more hardship you put yourself through, physical, mental, the more resilience you get from it. And you're just training yourself to deal with when that unchosen suffering comes. And I've taken so much out of that 12 hours yesterday, 14 hours yesterday. I've gotten more out of that than I have in my entire life of who I am and what I can do.
Yeah.
And now it's silly. Like now I look at, it's silly because it's a 70K run, and I'm sure listeners have probably done 70K runs easily.
Yeah.
But now I look at situations differently now, hardships differently, or problems that come up in my life.
Yeah.
I think of them differently now. I don't get too bogged down in them too much.
Say you're more responsive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Than reactive.
Yeah.
Yeah, big time. Yeah. Yeah, I'm more calmer and patient. And like, we had some stuff like happen today. And normally I would like, what the fuck's going on here? And then today I was like, it might be because I can't move. But today I was like, yeah, it's fine. It's all good. Not as bad as that run yesterday, so it's sweet. Like, you know, it's. I think it's given me a different perspective on a lot of things. And I'll tell you a quick story too.
Yeah.
Because perspective is something that I really wanted to have a chat about. And one of the things that really helped me on this run, when I was in a really dark place and my body was full of pain, there's a guy that I used to go to the gym with.
Yep.
The guy that used to go to I don't used to go with him. He was just there when I was there. We weren't friends or anything. And he was had his legs amputated from the knees down, and he was in an electric wheelchair, and he had his arm amputated from the elbow down.
Yep.
And his left arm was there, but it was very like poor movement, and he's in an electric chair, and he had a little finger where he could sort of control the electric chair, and he had a carer with him, and he would come into the gym, and he had little attachments where he could do a row or a lat pull down or do like bicep curls.
Yeah.
And he would always come in at the end of my workout, and at the end of my workout I'm fucked. Like, I've got no energy left, and I'm like, I can't do any more. I'm so tired. Even though I've got a couple more exercises left, I can't do any more. And he would walk in the door, and I'll go, oh, fuck, he's here. Now I have to do it. Like, every time I saw him, I was like, if I can do it, if he can come to the gym, I can do this last couple of sets. You know, and he'll come in every day and do a workout with a carer, with his own little attachments, and pump out a workout for 45 minutes. And I remember chatting to one of the guys at the gym, and I go, fuck, what a legend. Like, he's coming in every single day, and despite what's going on, and he goes, do you know what happened to him? I go, nah, what happened to him? And he was in a car with his wife and his young daughter in the back, and a drunk driver came and crashed into the car and killed his daughter, his wife, who was pregnant. Wow. And she died later in hospital. Daughter died on the scene, and he got rushed to hospital and obviously survived, but lost his ability to move from the waist down, lost his whole family, and he's coming into the gym every single day and doing a workout. And that changed my whole perspective. Like, from that moment 2 years ago when I saw that, heard that story, it's changed my whole perspective on life. Like, whenever I feel like it's hard, I think about him and I go, so fucking hard, you know. And I thought about him yesterday on that run when I was like, fuck, my legs are sore.
Yeah.
And I thought about him. I go, like he would kill to be in my position right now. And that was like one of my huge motivators was getting through it. Every time I feel like it was hard, I'd think about him and I'll go, it's not hard. What he went through is hard. I'm going to keep going.
Shout out to that guy for still showing up.
Yeah.
You know, going to the gym and still getting after it, even though there's significant trauma he's experienced, but still showing up.
Yeah, he doesn't. I haven't seen him in the gym lately. I think he's gone to a different gym, but yeah, even that memory of him coming into the gym, and I never spoken to him. I should have fucking just reached out to him and said what a huge inspiration he is. But his memory will always be with me of him going to the gym and doing a workout, then hearing his story. He's lost his whole family, his whole life has changed forever, and he shows up to the gym every day and does a workout.
Yeah.
And I think, fuck, when I'm tired and I can't be bothered doing a workout, I go, what's my excuse?
Yeah. And I think that energy and that mindset is good because sometimes we have to process emotions, but sometimes we're just feeling sorry for ourselves and we have to get out of that mindset. You know, it's nothing but feeling sorry for ourselves and trying to play a victim. Then once we have reminders like that or situations we can reflect back on, it's like, nah, I need to switch back into focus mode. I need to go. Like, I think having moments and things we can reflect on is so important.
Yeah, so important. And I think what you touched on just then was the victim. Like, I played that victim role.
Yeah.
Big time. I latched onto the role that, you know, there's something wrong with me. You guys would never understand. Like, I'm the victim here. And I played that role to the point where I was just like, hang on a second, mate. Like, it was a point of me. It was almost a point of me like growing up, and I acted like a kid, and just played this victim role, thinking that no one understand. It's something it was like a get out of jail free card.
Yeah,
you know, like that's an excuse, and it's just like no. Like, life, as hard as it is, life goes on. Yeah, and you got to accept what's happened has happened, and you can't get caught up in it, and you just got to accept how it's happened, why it's happened, and know that it's all that matters is that it's happened. And that's what's been huge for me is like getting outside of like making excuses and playing the blame game. Yeah. You know, I used to where like when situations in rugby when that coach didn't, if that coach liked me, I would have been somewhere else. And it's like, stop making excuses. Like, I'm in control. Like, it wasn't him who made me take drugs. Yeah. Or get on that alcohol bender or anything like that. It wasn't his fault. That was my decision.
All a choice.
It's all a choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
It goes back to that. You got to do what's right and not what's easy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the right road. And it's always, and 9 times out of 10, the right road's the hard road. But I think, like you said, you go back on, you put yourself through some hardships. Yeah. And the right way, even though it's the hard, it'll get easier as you go on. It won't be so hard the first time.
That's like even going to the gym. Like, most of the time, I do go gym regularly, but most of the time I'm not keen because like I have a big day. I'm like, fuck, I gotta go to the gym. I'm like, I just gotta go anyway and do it. But once I get in there and get in the momentum of it, I'm like, thank fuck I'm here.
Yeah, like, I have that same feeling.
Yeah, I've never ever left the gym and been like, I wish I didn't come.
Neither. Yeah. Neither. Every time I leave a gym, every time I've left a workout, I've gone, thank God I've done that. I feel so much better. Yeah. And it's just getting, I do the same thing of it. I've got that image of that guy coming to the gym, and that is burnt in my head. So any time that I feel like I don't want to go for a workout or go do anything, I just think of that guy and go, nah, like, he would kill to be in my position. I'm going. Yeah,
go get after it.
Yeah, he's my motivation. If he's listening, you're a legend.
Yeah, shout out.
Yeah, shout out to him. But yeah, that's one of my motivations is just having that perspective on life. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great, brother. And before we finish up here, I would like to ask you about, like, what is a message you'd like to leave here with the listeners?
Probably that message that we spoke about that really impacted me was there's always light at the end of the tunnel. I think that when you're in that dark place, wherever that place might be, whatever you're going through, at the time, trust me, I know it feels like you're not going to get out of it, or you feel like there's no other way, or you just accept that this is going to be your life or your reality. And I want you to know that there's always another option. There's always ways out. You may not think there is, or you may think that there's nothing can be done, or no one can help you, or you feel like you're alone. And I want people listening to know that you're loved, you're not alone, and if you put in that hard work that we spoke about today, if you really seek help and put yourself through that hardship and be comfortable with being afraid, like gonna seek help, get yourself out of bad situations, and just having that thought that you might be in the middle of the tunnel and you might not be able to see any light, but if you keep one foot in front of the other and keep moving forward, there's always light at the end of the tunnel. And that was a huge bit of advice someone gave me. And, and I kind of laughed at him when he told me, because I was this young 20-year-old kid thinking, what do you know? You're not me. But I've been through it. And that's a huge bit of advice that I could pass on to someone, is that you just keep putting the work in, and there's always light at the end of the tunnel.
Beautiful message, brother.
Thank you very much.
And for people want to connect with yourself, where can they find the podcast and anything else that you have to offer?
Yeah, so the podcast is called Mind Your Head Podcast. We've got that on Instagram, YouTube. Head over there. I think there might be in the show notes.
Yeah, it'll be in the bio.
In the bio, yeah. So we're doing great things. I think that we've got some amazing guests that have come in and shared some pretty traumatic stories, but there's a lot of learnings out of it. There's a lot of growth, and it's just about the podcast is about getting people comfortable with having uncomfortable conversations, and being okay that it's okay to be vulnerable. And I think it's such a good place to heal is when you just be open and vulnerable with someone, and creating a safe space for people to do that. And I don't want anyone else to go through a situation where they don't feel like they can talk to their mum or dad about something. Like, I'm so much more open to my mum and dad now that I've shared all my deepest, darkest things that have happened to me, and they'd be so accepting and made me feel so safe that all our conversations from now on has been so good. Yeah. So I don't want anyone else to feel that they're alone, and sometimes when you're in a headspace, you feel like you're alone, and not your situation's so individual, and really, like, there's a lot of people that have been through some similar things that we all can learn and share from, and so that's a big aim for mine, and I've realised that as the podcasts have gone on, I encourage so much feedback. I want to hear from people, and it's amazing the stories that are coming out of it. Yeah. And the more I've realised, like, holy shit, like, something that I thought was such a small group is massive. I'm getting messages from people in Canada and America and in India and Ireland and all across the world sending me messages and their stories of their childhoods and things that they've gone through. And I'm thinking, fuck, the reach on this is ridiculous. But it's that connection of people is amazing. And we all think like we all have different experiences, and we do. We all have different experiences, but at the same time, they're so similar too, and everyone's got their own story, and it's just encouraging people to be okay. Like, especially men. Like, I know women, they're quite more open than men, and it's just getting a lot of my friends group have been a bit quiet in terms of asking real podcast questions, and I think one of the best things was with me, my friends, and my dad was when you get them on a podcast, because when you're having a beer with them or you're having to sit down watching the footy, you don't ask them detailed questions. You say, how was your day? You talk about a few things. But I think a great tip for anyone listening is, if you really want to have a sit down with your mate or a family member, plan it like a podcast. Even if you're not filming it or whatever, just sit down and actually write down some questions and ask some serious, deep questions. And it'll be such a good bonding session. Yeah. So yeah, that's been.
You never know. You might be saving a life by doing that as well.
Yeah, you never know. Like, it all stemmed from that one podcast that I listened to, and it affected me so much. And all I want to do is pass that on. And if I could help someone, if that's saving their life, if it's them asking for help, I'm happy to do that, and it's something that I'm massively passionate about.
Beautiful, bro. I'm definitely going to check out the episode you did with your dad. That's my next on my list now to listen to on podcast.
Listen to it, Brent Hagen, and give me some of your feedback. I'd love to hear it.
I'm looking forward to it. And everyone, please check out Mind Your Head podcast. It's amazing. But thanks, brother.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.